Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reid, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. So, hello, welcome. For those of you that have already been tuned in to my previous podcast episodes, hi to you. For those of you that are new here, I'm going to be your coach for the next 45, 50 minutes or so. And I'm going to read from my best-selling book, Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine. I've got permission to share some aspects of it. So I'm going to read the majority of my book out, and the bits that I'm skipping can all be found in my free workbook, which you can find on the QR code there if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, if you head over to estellereid.com and you can download that resource along with my free journal, which also accompanies the book, and that will plug the missing gaps. I thought it'd give you something to listen to over the summer, and I also thought if you're listening, you're not going to be wanting to do the activities anyway, so that would be a good way to separate the material. So we are up to chapter 7, and this is Antidote number 7, Run a Tight Ship. So, quote, "People treat you how you let them." Mel Robbins. She's like my all-time favourite coach, by the way. One of the things I've learned personally, but also from the client group I'm writing this book for, is that we must run a tight ship if we're going to keep our heads above water. For this chapter, it means being strict and disciplined, oh, there's that D word, folks, with ourselves for our benefit, so that we're not overworking. This will go against the grain, but ultimately it'll be for everyone else's benefit too. We'll be much calmer, resourceful, resilient, happier, and more effective creatures to be with. I've spoken about this group of people being good eggs. They put others first, generously give away their time, adding to-dos to their production line at the risk of their health and well-being. Not to mention the squeeze they put on their own personal life. In this chapter, we're going to look at how to deal with any time and space stealers, which involves boundary management. I'm probably going to encourage you to do things that will feel uncomfortable at first, but that's the thing with habits. Change can be challenging. However, it'll be worth it, and you can use tools such as Havening or EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. More about that in the next chapter. To clear up any nurture-based, unconscious, automatic programs which are preventing the change you want to achieve. What you stand to gain is to rid yourself of unnecessary tasks, be able to spend time on the things that are important to you, because time is the only commodity we have. Did we have a good or a bad time whilst we walked this planet, basically, when it comes to time? Consciously own your space and give off alternative vibes so that you're not taken advantage of or burdened. Drive success by being able to focus on the results that you want, and create time and space so that you can access the joy of work life. Heading: Parkinson's Law. Cyril Northcote Parkinson was a British naval historian and author of 60 books. One of the most famous sayings was that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So in other words, work will fill whatever time we give it. There'll always be stuff to be done and things on our to-do list, but if we don't allow space for not working, we end up working all the time. One of my sayings is we have to live life in the space in between. We must learn to stop the production line and go and enjoy ourselves. More on this in chapter 10. To apply Parkinson's law, we have to have work-free time zones and manage our boundaries. I work from home and I soon learned to my detriment that I could work anytime. The office door would open easily, and before I knew it, I'd be sucked down a rabbit hole and have lost half a day. Heading: time boundaries. Work-free time zones are so important for workaholics. Learning to keep the door shut was one of the boundaries I had to set in place for myself. Door shut meant that it was time for personal time. Most of my clients know that if they want to get hold of me at the weekends or in the evenings, number one, it needs to be an emergency. And number two, the best way to contact me is to send me a text, as I rarely check on my emails. These basic rules mean that I can fully enjoy my time off with my family, rest, recharge, and have fun, but also then do my best in work when I'm with my clients. More about fun in chapter 10. So what comes next is a series of actions which you can download in that free workbook. Head over to Estelle Reed. Read is read as in a book. estellereed.com. Next heading, we've got 4 hours. Still not convinced that you should cut back on your hours and have work-free time zones? According to Stanford's Alex Pang, author of Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less, a knowledge worker should only work for 4 hours. Apparently, we can only concentrate and be involved in creative, real thinking activities for 4 hours. Beyond that, our brain performs below par. Working longer hours becomes a false sense of economy. The likes of Charles Darwin knew this instinctively. He would work for 2 90-minute periods in the morning and then an hour later. So if we only have 4 hours, what do we do with the rest of our time at work? The answer being we do tasks that we can perform on autopilot. So this is an example of me performing on autopilot. So I've already done the thinking for this book. All I'm doing is literally reading it out to you. I know how to operate the recording equipment, because this morning I've worked for 3.5 hours coaching a group. So it means that my good thinking time has already been used up. So I want to do something that's going to require fewer brain calories. And that for me is reading this out to you. So if we only have 4 hours, what do we do with the rest of our time? We do tasks that we can perform on autopilot. Sorry, I'm repeating myself there, aren't I? Yes, you get permission to switch your autopilot on. Use this time to do the mind-numbing activities such as sifting through email, filing, and admin. Give your brain a rest. I work with lots of execs that run meetings back to back all day without a break. I mean, that made it even worse when the pandemic hit, didn't it? People were literally running for a quick loo break in between sessions, not to mention sat there eating a lunch over Zoom meetings. Is it no surprise they're knackered and not as effective as they could be? How can they possibly follow up on actions from a meeting? It's no wonder that the to-do lists start to stack up and the joy of their job has deserted them. And then we've got another series of action reflection points. Heading: your production line. Having worked for many manufacturing businesses, I use a production line analogy when talking to my clients about the workload. Inputs at the start. So at one end, we have the inputs. So, on a production line, you'll have raw materials and products. These are the tasks you put on your production line, which you agree to do either consciously or unconsciously. So sometimes people will know oh, good old so-and-so, we know they'll get the job done. People do assume that we'll do something, and that's where we do have to come off our autopilot. So that's your inputs. In the middle, we've got the process. This is you doing the work, or this is the manufacturing company turning the widgets at one end into a thing. And then at the other end, we've got the output, and this is task completion. So this is so I used to work for a car seat manufacturer. When the car seat was finished at the end, it would then go through quality to make sure that it complied to the standard. And it's the same with us. So input at one end, all the jobs we have to do. Then there's us in the middle, which can create a bottleneck, getting the task done. And then they only come off our to-do list once the task is complete, which is why sometimes our production lines can break down. When we agree to do too much, tasks begin to build up. We get pressure from our customers inquiring when their order is going to be fulfilled. This adds more pressure. In this scenario, we've got several strategies. We can either speed up the conveyor belt, so that's you. Oh, I'm just going to work a bit faster. I'm going to work a bit harder. But then we know that mistakes start to happen and the quality starts to be affected. That's when I used to work on the production line or work for a factory, quality would send it back up to be reworked if it didn't meet the standard. The other thing we can do is we can extend productivity hours, do overtime. But as we've learned, it's a false sense of economy because we're not as effective if we break the 4-hour thinking rule. And again, that's what used to happen when I worked in the factory. If we were trying to catch up on an order, and I'm not kidding, if we stopped the car manufacturing production line that we were making these car seats for, we'd get fined. So sometimes we put people on overtime to catch up on the backlog to make sure we had those car seats coming through. But you know what? We'd have a higher instance of mistakes, so more seats being returned because people were tired. And it's the same with us, even in the knowledge industry. The other option we have is to keep the production line going during shutdown. At weekends, during holidays, however, we know that before long, we're at risk of breakdown because we haven't carried out essential repairs and maintenance. Often the clients I work with, they'll forgo holidays. They'll either work on holiday or they'll skip holidays altogether and they'll work throughout the year. Well, of course, is it any wonder that then they break down or they end up with burnout or whatever else going on with stress, anxiety, depression, and it's because they've overworked themselves. One of the reservations I get from my clients when it comes to cutting back on their hours is that they have too much to do in too short a timescale and therefore convince themselves that they have to work excessive hours, but all the time. I understand entirely that there are times when it's all hands on deck and that you are required to work longer hours, and that's okay, provided it's now and then. Heading, your production plan. If you were a factory manager, you would have a production plan. You'd know how much product you could make at any one time, how long the team would have to work to make it, and when the shutdowns were going to be for repairs and maintenance. Knowing all of this helps the factory manager identify when he or she can deliver a customer's product. Imagine, however, if they said yes to all the orders without any reference to what was already scheduled to be made. This would mean some delivery deadlines would invariably get missed and the operatives would have to work permanent overtime. Do you remember me telling you about crying in my pajamas when I first set up my business? I had no production plan. I hadn't worked out what time I needed to effectively run my business. Now I know that if I need half a week, that I need half a week client facing and half a week running the business. And I block the time out in my diary and I see clients every other day. Several days on the trot training, facilitating or coaching is just too tiring. I don't perform at my best. I'm not as sharp as I could be. I don't shine. And it also links to this 4-hour rule. And then we've got a series of actions. So we'll skip those. Next heading, chock-a-block. I used to wince as I heard myself, sorry, my diary is chock-a-block. Conveniently for this book, the term chock-a-block comes from a nautical word meaning that the tackle blocks are too close together. My diary being chock-a-block is a sign that I've not been spacing my appointments out sufficiently enough. This includes both social and work appointments. How many of us run appointments back to back, including in the evenings and at weekends? If you've got kids, one of the things you can do for them is stop ferrying them around to lots of organised play, hobby, sporting activities. What are we actually unconsciously teaching our young humans about work life? Not to rest, not to experience those gaps in time, boredom and relaxation, where we must be resourceful and create our own fun. Think about those folk of the Gen Xers. We had to make our own fun. We made our own fun when we got bored and we weren't being organised. We're teaching them to be constantly switched on and to be busy. We book out every other weekend to ourselves as a family and limit our daughter's activities to the week so that we can escape to our boat if we want to. It helps us rest, stay well, be connected and appreciate our home. And it prevents us from being chock-a-block. I also book out time in my work diary. Half of the week I'm client facing, the other half of the week I'm running my business. This is my admin time or my skiving off to the spa with my friend time. So, another set of actions, so we'll skip over them. The above habit requires real discipline, but it's what will keep you running a tight ship and effectively pacing and managing your production line so that it doesn't break down. Heading, managing your production line. Being a workaholic, experiencing imposter syndrome means that we give ourselves too much to do. That's right, it's our fault. No employer forces us to do anything. We vote with our feet every day by showing up and saying yes through our actions. We fail to delegate, negotiate expectations, and be realistic about what we can deliver. We also accept the burden of additional work because we're good eggs. We feel knowledgeable when people ask for advice, so willingly give it and also our time. If we're going to run a tight ship, we need to learn to stop putting unnecessary things on the production line in the first place. When I was employed by the boss from hell, I got myself into a hot, stressy mess. Firstly, I felt overwhelmed by the 20 emails containing actions she'd sent whilst I was in bed asleep. Lots of wild ideas she'd identified in the middle of the night. I never knew what to take seriously. I would organise my day by whatever instruction she barked at me over the desk, as opposed to creating a to-do list and negotiating my priorities. These days, I light tasks on my phone. I save brain calories by knowing that my jobs are captured. The minute I remember to do something, I add it to my phone because I tend to have it with me. Deadlines don't bite me on the bum because I schedule time for project work and I've got target dates for all my tasks. These pop up on my watch. I also use, I'm going to say it quietly because she might go off, my Alexa, to create a shopping list. She can also do to-do lists too. The family uses it to add items which we're about to run out of. We all got a telling off the other day because we ran out of some medication. I think it was heartburn medication. We'd been out for pizza and my daughter got really bad heartburn. Pizza is one of our special treat meals. And as we'll get into on chapter 10, one of the things that can stop us from shining is fueling our body with the foods that don't agree with us. Anyway, she'd got this a serious case of heartburn. So I had to quickly make up a heartburn remedy using, I think it was bicarbonate of soda. It did the trick. But we got a telling off, as I say, from Mr. R, because he's in charge of shopping now. And we'd not added it to our Alexa shopping list. So where am I up to? So this shares the burden of having to remember everything. So in other words, we share the shopping burden or the running out of items burden by all adding stuff to the shopping list on Alexa, and then my husband will put the shopping list together once he's been through that list. Running a tight ship, being organised and having systems prevents firefighting, triggering our stress response and stops us from panicking like Mr. Mannering. And then we've got a series of actions, which I'll skip over. An example of a belief which may be an obstacle to your new tight ship habits would be, everything must be right. I can't afford to get things wrong, and if I do, I'm a failure. This belief, so this relates to the series of actions, which I've just skipped over, if you're wondering, what the hell is she on about now? This belief then leads to perfectionist tendencies and the need to be in control. So if you were able to get to the root cause memory which created this belief, so in other words, why do you need to be in control? Why do you need to be the perfectionist? What's the fear or concern relating to getting things wrong? Or where does the fear of feeling like a failure come from? And I was talking to the group I was coaching this morning, and I was explaining that I worked with a gentleman years ago, and he had real perfectionist tendencies, and he had this big fear of making mistakes, and he did make a mistake, and there was a potential claim against professional negligence insurance. And so this was kind of his worst nightmare. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So he had a fear of failure, a fear of making mistakes. And it was all connected with a childhood event in his past where he was told, or he overheard someone say, he was the mistake. So I've heard this time and time again, stories where the child was the mistake child or the accident child, and that becomes their birth story. But do you know what? The difficulty with being the mistake child or the accident child is they grow up thinking, well, I have to justify my existence. You know, mistakes are a bad thing, clearly. And so they develop what I refer to as a behavioural coping strategy. So in order to not feel those horrible feelings, so in other words, mistakes are a bad thing, that type of stuff. So you develop a behavioural coping strategy that moves you away from that horrible feeling. So that might look like perfectionism. If I am perfect, I am not going to make a mistake over here. If I am in control, again, I'm not going to make a mistake or fail over here. But it becomes an outdated strategy. And I see it cause problems for leaders because they have a strong need to control and to be perfect, they then have difficulties delegating further down the line, because if I delegate, then I am at risk of failure. So the best thing is I'm going to do everything myself. But of course, so circling back to the analogy of, we then end up with too much stuff on our production line, too many to-dos, that actually could give someone else a great development opportunity. But again, just as we were getting into with the leaders I was working with today, that development strategy is around becoming a leader as coach. So we grow and develop our team members. We trust them to get on and to have a go at dealing with the task. We don't abandon them so that we're still at risk of failure, but we gradually let go of tasks by coaching individuals so that they can take over some of those activities that are on your production line, lessening the workload and the demand on you as the leader. But circling back to the guy that, his behavioural coping strategy was perfectionism, workaholism, being in control, but also pleasing and making people like him. If I make people like me, then I'm no longer a mistake. If I perfect, then I'm not making a mistake, etc., etc. But this then led to ultimately burnout and being very stressed and very anxious and going off work sick. And all we did is we used havening to clear all that stuff off the production line, which enabled him to not only reduce his workload by a significant amount, he just said, you know what, why am I doing all of these cases when my peers are doing a fraction of the amount? So he delegated some stuff back, so took it off his production line. He also reduced the number of team members that he was leading. Again, he was managing double the amount of team members compared to his peers. And in doing so, he took stuff off his production line, and that was because he was no longer afraid of making mistakes, needing to be a perfectionist, but also making people like him. He realised he was a worthwhile person. And as I say, we just cheated that change by havening that stuff away. And if you've not done the havening work yet, my experience is that when people do the havening work, if you can get to the root cause, you don't even need what's in this chapter. What you will find is you get rid of those triggers that are causing the behavioural coping strategy, which is basically doing too much. And you'll find that once your stress triggers have gone, there's no need to overdo things, to overwork, to overprove your worth, to get people to like you. All beliefs and behavioural strategies which cause you or give you more to do. For those of you that are thinking, well, either I've not listened to the havening chapter yet, or I can't be bothered with all of that stuff, I offer a Shine coaching program, a Shine one-to-one coaching program. So I can do all that heavy lifting for you, and I can clear up those events along your timeline, just as I did with the other gentleman. And if you head over to my website, estellereid.com, you can find the Shine coaching program on there. Right. So let's carry on with the book. So next heading, saying yes when you mean no. To manage our production line, we need to raise our awareness of what we're saying yes to, either consciously or unconsciously, both at home and at work. Whenever I deliver either assertiveness or time management events, I talk about the importance of being able to say no. Often we don't like to say no because, first bullet point, we don't want to disappoint or let anyone down. We like to please and don't want to cause offence. Or, alternatively, we might tell ourselves anything for an easier life because of a fear of conflict. But I'll ask you, is it easier? Is it easier for you to take on all those extra things on your production line? Whilst dropping our daughter off at nursery, one of the parents who had a reputation for getting everyone else to look after their kids and not returning the favour asked me if I would like their elder child to come along to my daughter's 4th birthday party to assist. In the olden days, I would have automatically and unconsciously said yes to avoid causing offence. However, and it's taken a lot of practice, I used my polite and honest policy. I thanked them for their offer and said I would need to get my head down organising the games and the food and having an extra child to give jobs to would give me another job to do. One of the other parents gave me a knowing nod. My mum uses a brilliant phrase that I say to myself to keep my yeses in check. If they're cheeky enough to ask, you're cheeky enough to say no. And then we've got a series of actions to reflect on. Saying no used to make me feel selfish. In the above example, I didn't feel like a total cowbag, as their daughter was coming to the party. I was, however, putting our needs first. Hey, I wanted to be there for my daughter, to watch her having fun, to be in what I was in with her. They're not little forever. They're not. She's now 16, nearly 17. Saying yes to that extra child would have meant saying no to the time that I had planned on giving to my daughter and her immediate friends. Plus, I'm not a great multitasker. I just can't. I'm rubbish at it. Once we say yes to a job, it's on the production line and it has to be managed until it comes off at the other end. Next heading, time stealers. I can remember a friend saying to me, "How do you get time to read?" We're back to Parkinson's law. It's how we choose to spend our time. Do you remember me saying that one of my limiting beliefs about writing this book was that I didn't think I would have enough time? I had to relook at how I was allocating my time. Otherwise, I would have been chock-a-block. I must admit, I have been sporting the drag through a bush backwards look, and I gave up straightening my hair. I've also spent less time chatting at the school gates, but interestingly, I've not had to pull in all-nighters or early mornings to get my book written. This is in a year when the business has increased by 15%, I've vlogged most weeks, and increased my following by 25%. We all have the same 24 hours at our disposal. However, sometimes we get dragged into stuff that's just noise and takes us away from that destination joy and gives us extra things to do. For example, WhatsApp groups. I have found myself picking up the phone to see 40 notifications and I've only been away for a couple of hours, nonsense stuff about how do I deal with a frog that's in my garden? I don't know. Let it hop away. I can be an unsociable git, but it was giving me an extra task to do. So I ejected myself, and that was quite a funny situation. So the final straw of that group was we used to go dog walking, and one of the things you might have seen that one of the things that dog walkers do is they go, particularly if you're doing a circular route, is you might drop your poo bag by a lamppost and then you pick it up on the way back. That was what we do. Now, don't get me wrong, it is so annoying, when you see dog muck bags dangling from bushes as you go out walking, or even still poo bags that have not been picked up. And I totally understand that is a frustrating thing. We are not irresponsible people. We believe in taking our dog muck home. Anyway, on the WhatsApp group, my husband had been on a walk. He'd only been gone 20 minutes, and all of a sudden it was lighting up with messages. And somebody had taken a picture of my dog's dog muck bag. Now, we have an extra large dog, so we have very unique bags for the extra large, what. And straight away I was like, oh my God, that's one of ours. And I knew which lamppost it was by. Anyway, so I quickly rang up Mike. I said, have you left a dog muck bag? I said, because the WhatsApp group is lighting up. And there was all sorts of effing and jeffing and angry emojis and all that type of thing. So in the end, I wrote back and I said, look, that dog muck bag is ours. And my husband's on a circular route and he will pick it up on the way back. But it was at that point I thought, do you know what? I'm going to eject myself from this group. And actually, I've sacked off WhatsApp altogether. And it was interesting. I was reading the other day that, what's he called? Ed Sheeran. He doesn't even have a mobile phone. He only checks in on his social media stuff and his emails and everything else once a week on his iPad. How radical is that? But it definitely gives you headspace, not having to deal with all of that nonsense. And then we've got some action steps which get you to reflect on what things you could do to sack off, and also to reflect on maybe who some of your time wasting people are, and also some of the interrupters in your life. But yeah, again, all of that stuff is included in the free workbook. So, next heading, people boundaries. So we've looked at time boundaries. We also need to consider our people boundaries too. A boundary is an imaginary line that we set for ourselves in terms of how we allow people to treat us. And often there can be connections with our values and beliefs. I used to be a complete doormat. It was fine for people to walk all over me. I would dust myself off and continue to be loyal. I would allow others to be disrespectful and unkind and would simply retreat away from the bad behaviour. I would stay quiet and stay hurt. One of the things I hear myself saying to my clients when they tell me about how someone has treated them is, "That's not okay, is it?" They often look at me like I've slapped them with a wet fish. They have been so used to unconsciously accepting the bad behaviour from others that it doesn't seem to register on the radar. So what do I mean by bad behaviour? There are certain behaviours which put me on alert to manage my boundaries. For example, when someone is, the first one is, over-controlling. A previous boss used to ask what I'd been doing in the toilet. Catching 5 minutes from my best mate, if the truth be told. She would also try to get me to change my notes from disciplinary hearings and would say things like, "Are you sure the line manager said that?" Her behaviour would trigger doubt in myself. It would also infringe on my value of integrity and honesty. Manipulative. So manipulative behaviour for me is another red flag. They sow the seed of something which they think needs to be done and know that because you're a responsible type, you'll pick up the gauntlet and run with it. They drop hints, they play the victim, and they give reasons as to why they can't deal with the matter themselves. And before you know it, you've added another job on your production line, and often it's a crappy one. The other red flag for me is aggressive or rude people. I used to be scared of anyone who showed me aggression and would freeze, let alone be able to stand my ground or open my mouth. Whilst on a trip up north, I bumped into an old work colleague that I'd helped through a difficult time. They'd been having mental health issues. My guard was down, and with hindsight, she was doing the whole smiling assassin thing. I didn't detect what was about to come. A public dressing down. I naively thought she wanted me to help her again. She told me she was annoyed with me and that I had not provided her with enough support. You could argue she was using her honesty policy, but she wasn't being polite. She was distorting the facts. I'd spent hours listening and coaching her through her problems for free, signposting her to various resources. Nobody else in the support network had done this. She was being unfair, so I calmly reminded her of the facts. I was very honest and polite. She crossed the line. She lost my loyalty. I know I'd been generous with my time and I'd given enough of myself. Enough was enough. The other red flag for me is selfish, one-way street takers. You know the sort. They fail to pay the bill when the bill is presented, or their portion of the bill. They don't return dinner invitations. They disappear when it's time to clear the dishes. They forget to bring the gift. They expect you to do all the running and then moan because they don't see enough of you. They look after number one. They're interested in what they can get from a person or an establishment. The relationship is one way. It's such a shame as they're missing out on the real pleasure of balanced giving to others. Next heading, boundary management solutions. First of all, you can call out the behaviour. Use tangible, specific examples of what you've seen or heard. So in other words, with your own eyes and ears, not hearsay, the actual facts, and explain how it makes you feel. Then agree how you'd like things to be instead. Use the polite and honest policy. If the relationship is unbalanced, take corrective action. Ask for what you need, and if they're not forthcoming, withdraw whatever it was that you were giving and then move on. Step away from the relationship if needs be, or reduce your exposure. Life is short, my friend. Spend your time wisely and, where possible, on the things that bring you joy. Next heading, owning your space. To support our boundaries, it's important to give off an alternative vibe so that people know you mean business. We need to own our space. One of the things I notice with this client group is that they minimize themselves physically by making the body smaller, by contracting themselves and closing the body language. They minimize themselves mentally by adopting imposter syndrome thoughts and not believing they are good enough. They also minimize themselves linguistically in the way that they interact with others. But worst of all, they allow others to minimize them. Have you ever experienced a situation when someone enters your space and you feel knocked out the way, even though they haven't physically touched you? I can remember being on holiday in Halkidiki. I'd finished walking on the beach barefoot and was washing the sand off my feet. A fellow holidaymaker barged metaphorically into my space as opposed to waiting in the queue. I know, I'm British. Her action made me feel hurried and as though I needed to move out the way, as her needs were more pressing. I turned to see what the emergency was. There wasn't one. The old me would have scarpered out the way so that she could occupy the space in which I was standing. Instead, I acknowledged her, held a gaze, and carried on. My husband would have taken extra time. He would have. Intricately washing his feet. He's great at owning his space. I get regular requests from HR directors to help a member of staff be more confident. Take Harry, a lawyer who'd been sent for coaching because he was giving the wrong impression to his clients. Technically, he was very able, but he was giving off the wrong vibes, which undermined the impression he gave to clients. His lack of confidence made his clients lack confidence in the advice he was giving. Linguistically, he would undermine and minimize himself by over-apologizing, using just, kind of, and do you know what I mean? He would obsessively touch his cufflinks and his face. These are known as reassurance gestures. It says here Prince Charles, King Charles, taps his handkerchief, pocket, and his cufflinks before entering a public arena. He had no armpit space, so this is the client, as I like to call it, so the distance between his arm and the side of his chest. His knees, shins and feet were also clenched together. His chin was dipped so that his eye contact looked submissive. He wasn't owning his space. This guy wanted to be a partner one day, but was damaging his credibility as perceived by others. His potential wasn't shining through. So then we've got some action reflection points to consider how you might be shrinking your space. Can you remember Mark from chapter 1, the exec who wanted more presence in the boardroom? He stopped undermining himself linguistically by deleting the word sorry from his vocabulary. Unless, of course, he genuinely needed to apologise. We got rid of the limiting beliefs from his childhood, which made him invisible. He took positive steps to begin owning his space. He prepared himself for meetings by arriving early and sitting in a position where he could get the CEO's attention, as opposed to sitting back away from the rest of the group. He broadened out his physiology and his personal possessions. So in other words, his notebook, his papers. So he spread himself out, giving the impression of confidence whilst also making himself feel better. Gone was the small, scrunched up, hedgehog-like physiology, which made it easier for him to be ignored. He stopped being the chief note-taker, which meant he got a more realistic proportion of the actions. He stopped being the good egg who ensured everyone had their cup of tea. He brought his giving and receiving back into balance. He let others take a turn. He was able to raise the important matters that he previously couldn't find his voice for. He physically and mentally claimed his space at the table. Next heading, be mindful of the gap. Mark was a firstborn and he'd got into the habit of feeling obliged to fill the gaps through unconscious messages he was given as a child by his parents. I coach a high proportion of firstborns. When you look at the firstborn theory, they're used to being responsible because of being left to their own devices. They learn how to take care of themselves and their younger siblings. This level of responsibility taking stays with them through to adulthood. Any theory is a generalization, and I appreciate that not all families fit within this dynamic. I've coached many responsible middle and last or only borns too. Because we continue to fill the gaps, people continue to let us. For example, there were folk in my life that I would routinely call and maintain contact with. They didn't call me because at an unconscious level, they knew before long I would pick up the phone, FaceTime, or make arrangements to see them. I changed this policy a few years ago, and do you know what? Some of those relationships have gone by the wayside. This hurt at first, but it taught me that there has to be give and take, not take. Otherwise, we're giving ourselves more things to do. We get a reputation for being responsible. People know unconsciously through our past patterns of behaviour that we're great at getting a job done and for being busy and stressed. When I facilitate team sessions, there are always certain characters that can be relied upon when we get to the action planning phase. They're the first to nominate themselves for the tasks, whereas others will happily sit back, not take any actions themselves, and then designate other people that aren't even in the room. And that's because they know they won't kick up a fuss when they find out. Unconsciously, the good eggs have been picking up the tab for other people's work when others are not forthcoming. Take Nigel, for example. He'd been unconsciously saying yes to his team for years. He was highly capable executive running a business employing over 250 people. He wouldn't think anything of clearing up the cups, the equipment after meetings, whilst the rest of the team scarpered and left him to it. Now, I'm all for leaders leading by example. However, I'm not for people being taken advantage of. Equally, I'm not suggesting that you become a lazy leader either. However, if we focus on doing the right things, the important results or outputs we're employed to deliver in a role, the things that make us a success, we shine more. Sometimes we need to rebrand ourselves through our actions so that we get known for being something different, preventing people from unconsciously taking advantage of us. Be more like Bob. So there's a series of actions which I'll come on to. When I challenged Nigel, he said, "Well, it took me 10 minutes. However, those are 10 minutes that could have been shared by the rest of the team and took him away from managing his business. It also reinforced his "you can take advantage of me" brand. 10 minutes here and there soon add up over the days, weeks, and years. When coachees protest, I ask them to work out their hourly rate and establish how much it costs the business. We then work out how else that time could be used. Next heading: recognise when you've used up your help quotient. I could be a full-time professional coffee drinker and free coaching business mentor. I wouldn't make any money out of it. I used to even be the one that was out of pocket because I didn't like to be stingy and found it hard to let others pay. I recently got a request for coffee via LinkedIn from a life coach. She said, looking at my profile, she thought there was a lot of synergy. I didn't think so when I reviewed her profile and listened to her long, pushy voice message. She was working in a very different market and selling services that were unrelated to mine. I used my honest and polite policy and tried to help by suggesting she contact someone in my network whom I thought would have this magical synergy she mentioned. She persisted. 3 long, meandering and slightly sarcastic messages later, brackets, did she really think I was going to meet up with her after that, close brackets. It called for my really honest and polite policy. Last year, I realised I used up my help quotient and chose to use my time differently to write this book. For almost 8 years, I'd volunteered for my local CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development branch, and trained and mentored the branch members to be coaches for free. I did it because I love the industry, and when I was developing as an HR professional, I paid to be mentored through my exams, so would have loved the free service which we were providing. Additionally, it floated my professional boat. I love seeing people grow and develop. It makes my hair stand on end and sometimes moves me to tears. After agonising for months over the decision, I gave the role up. So, we've got some more actions. We'll skip over those. Now, do I ever go out for a coffee? I sure do. I have a lovely network of clients and associates that I go and chew the cud with, but there's a fair exchange of information and business. Balanced giving and taking. If you're in any doubt as to whether you're benefiting from meeting or how you're allocating your time, ask yourself, number 1, what's the purpose of the meeting? Number 2, what's in it for them? Number 3, what's in it for me? Number 4, what will be the positive and negative consequences of me giving this time away? Number 5, will this use of time bring me joy? This is your get out clause if you really can't justify spending the time. The LinkedIn life coach eventually got the message. I said that I didn't think there was any synergy, which is why I'd recommended she contact someone else. I don't like having to be really honest and polite. However, some people have the skin of a rhinoceros. They are unable to pick up on the subtle cues which are being communicated and carry on badgering you regardless. If I'd met up with her so that I didn't offend, I would have resented it. That resentment would have caused tension in my body and I would have lost valuable time. Dealing with the life coach required me to manage both my time and my people boundaries. Practicing both these disciplines means you'll run a tight ship. It will give you more time to do the important things, less stress because you won't have unnecessary to-dos, and you'll be able to focus on delivering the things that make you shine. Heading: Summary of key points. Work fills the time we give it. We all have the same 24 hours a day. Create work time boundaries. If we are to optimize our performance and enhance our shine, we need to restrict our thinking time to 4 hours. Manage your production line by restricting what goes on it in the first place, by saying no, delegating, and not taking responsibility for tasks that aren't yours. Stop filling the responsibility gaps. Understand your production plan. What can you realistically produce in the time you have? How much time do you need to do all the elements of your job? Schedule recurring blocks of time to help slow down your production line. Don't be chock-a-block with appointments, running them back to back. Apply the same rules to your personal diary too. Even the most extroverted need downtime. If you're tired, your shine is dulled and you won't perform at your best. Be like Bob. Manage your people boundaries. This will help you to rebrand how you're perceived and what people can and cannot get away with. Use the honest and polite policy. And then finally, recognise when you've used up your help quotient. Ask yourself what you stand to gain and lose, and analyse whether it's worth it. So, coming up next in the next podcast episode is chapter 8, and this is about developing your inner captain. So, we all have an inner critic. We're going to turn that on its head and develop an inner captain instead. And there's loads of reasons why we do that, and I'll talk you through the practical strategies and ways in which you can do it. If, as I say, you don't want to do the heavy lifting and you want me to help you support this change through tackling imposter syndrome, workaholism, or stress, you can find my Shine coaching program at estellereid.com. Thanks for listening and tune in again next week. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.